Hi, welcome everybody to this Star Telegram live Ask Us Anything event. I am sports editor Jim Barnes, and I'm joined by our high school sports reporter Charles Baggarly. How are you doing, Charles?
I'm good. How are you, Jim?
Doing well, doing well. It's the best time of the year. We're getting ready to start the high school football playoffs tomorrow night, and so we're going to talk about a lot of things related to the playoffs, and we'll
Mhm.
answer any reader questions that are submitted to us. Let's just start, Charles. Last year, the Fort Worth area had a state champion in North Crowley. We've got several championship contenders this year. Who are some of the teams that you think could be playing all the way into December?
Yeah, well, there's a big difference between the good and the great in Texas high school football. And I think some of the teams that can compete for state titles this year, it really remains the same. Alito is a team that can compete for a state title basically any season. South Lake Carroll, of course, ranked number one in the state and the favorite to win the Class 6A Division II state championship. They, of course, have the potential to go on a deep run and win the whole thing. North Crowley is a bit of a different situation. Of course, you can't count out last year's champion. They should be considered a threat until someone takes them out, but it's a different team. Now, they've been improving since a loss to Rockwall in non-district play. They're going to have a ton of challenges that they need to face. They will be labeled as underdogs, but they were labeled as underdogs last year as well. So I wouldn't count out Ray Gates and company, but they have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, let's talk just a little bit more about North Crowley. Like I said, they haven't been as dominant this season. Like I said, a lot of new faces, but they are ranked number 9 in the state by Dave Campbell's Texas Football. They beat number 10 Denton Geyer during the season. They beat DeSoto. So do you see them as a true threat, or do you think they are lagging just a little bit behind the top tier of 6A D1?
I'll say it's really hard to tell right now. If you look at their non-district schedule, they faced some of the toughest competition in Texas, and Coach Gates does that for a reason. He always told me that in order to be the best, you have to prepare against the best. Now, they didn't look great in that stretch. They had a lot of new faces, as we've talked about, and they were learning. So district play comes along, and they face competition that is not quite on that level, even though Lake Ridge is still a good team. They beat Lake Ridge thoroughly, but that gave them some time to, as what Coach Gates calls, sharpen the sword, just prepare to cut down on the penalties, to make sure everyone understands the offense and the defense and what they're trying to do. It's a long season, and that this team is growing. It's hard to tell what the potential is because they face different competition in district play than what they'll face in the playoffs. Now, those playoff opponents are going to get real good real quick. North Crowley has some tough challenges ahead, especially with Allen. Now, Allen is a program that they've taken down the last 2 seasons, but Allen's ranked number 2 in the state. That might be a very, very serious challenge for North Crowley if that matchup does happen. I would consider Allen the favorite, but it would be best not to count out North Crowley until they're down and out.
Well, let's talk about a team that I would say is definitely the favorite in its division, which is South Lake Carroll.
Mm-hmm.
Been dominant all season. They're the number 1 ranked team in the state. Been a dominant force in the Fort Worth area for a long, long time, but it may not seem like it. They actually have not won the state championship since 2011. Now, last year they lost in the state championship game to Austin Vandegrift. Who can stop Carroll this season? I mean, you look at 6A Division II, the only top 10 teams in there with them are number 7 Prosper, who they could meet in the 3rd round, and Denton Geyer, which would be a potential region final. There'll be somebody good coming out of the other half from Region 3 and Region 4. You have Humboldt Summer Creek, which was a state semifinalist last year. But this has to be the Dragons' year, right? I mean, they've got all the horses. I mean, seemingly everything's lined up for them. And I know they certainly expect to win the state championship, don't they?
I'll say this, Jim. They expect to do well, and they do every year. Last year, I believe that at their full potential, they were the best team in Class 6A Division II. Now, they dealt with a ton of injuries. One of them to Davis Penn. He was out for the season last year. They struggled to compete while being so shorthanded. They lost Riley Wormley as well, a USC pledge, who graduated last year. But let's talk about this year. They have been ranked number 1 since the start of the season, and they have not disappointed. They've surpassed all expectations, and they've really dominated their competition. Now, Southlake Carroll has struggled to get over the hump in recent years. That's been a challenge with them. They've been talented every season, but this is Texas high school football. It's easier said than done to just go and make a run for the state title. You're going to be facing great teams day in and day out each round of the playoffs. But to be honest, Southlake Carroll seems like they're a level above the entirety of the field. And that includes any team in Texas, not just Class 6A Division II. Just because they're in Division II doesn't necessarily mean they're worse than teams in Division I. So I think at their full potential, they're better than the rest, but this is football. Anything can happen. We're going to get some cold weather towards the end of the season. The offense, obviously outstanding. It's, in my opinion, the best offense that I've seen as a whole, and that includes North Crowley from last season. It's close. Defensively is where they really stand out this year. In the past, Southlake Carroll's offense has been ahead of its defense, and now it feels like they're right there together. The defense could be the reason they get over the hump and finally win that state title.
Well, let's move on to another perennial contender around here, which is Aledo. They have maintained their insane district winning streak. I believe it's up to 135 now. But that included where they had to rally, come back to beat Denton Ryan. Now, of course, last year they beat Denton Ryan in the regular season and then lost to him in the regional final. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of where you see this season heading to this year? I know Aledo's number 1 in the state in 5A D1. Ryan's number 4. I mean, there are a lot of other good teams in there. You have number 2 Frisco Lone Star, number 6 Highland Park. Of course, the defending champion, number 3 Smithson Valley, is on the other side of the bracket. But do you see this heading to another Aledo-Ryan showdown in the region final? And how do you look at the Bearcats' chances overall of getting their 13th state title?
Yeah. I think when you have 12 state titles, you have to be looked at as the favorite in every scenario. Now, they beat Denton Ryan in the regular season this year, and I think if they meet up in the playoffs again, I do think that will happen. If they are to play again, I would consider Aledo the favorite. I think that they've improved from last year to this year. However, I considered Aledo a favorite last year. So anything can happen. And Denton Ryan is certainly capable of beating them. I mean, we saw their regular season contest this year. It was close. Aledo fought to the very end and barely won that game. And that's what Aledo does. They find a way to win whatever talent they have on their roster, whatever situation they're in. Aledo historically has been able to just find a way. And Robbie Jones, who took over as head coach for Tim Buchanan 3 years ago, he's been a part of that program for a very long time. So he knows the Aledo standard and what he has to do to maintain their success. Now, considering Aledo, I feel like they've improved. I think that they should be the team to beat, the undisputed team to beat. Last year, that wasn't the same situation. You know, they were growing, they were learning. I think their situation this year is improved. I think their offensive line and defensive line, they're both standouts in the state, and it's going to take a near perfect game to take them down.
What, we got a lot of good teams in the area. What some of the other contenders, you get down to the 4A level. These are teams that are in our area districts. They're a little farther out from Fort Worth, but 4A Division I, Alvarado's number 6, Springtown's number 7. I believe they're both undefeated. 4A Division II, you have Brock, which is number 3 in the state, and they've been knocking on the door for a bunch of years here. Now, their problem is you've got Carthage, which is such a monster in 4A Division II. It's who knocked Brock out last year in the state semifinals. But what do you think about some of our contenders in the area here in 4A?
Yeah, I'll talk about Alvarado and Springtown first. When it comes to Fort Worth area 4A football, they're a level above the rest. Now, the gap between the good, better, and best in 4A is huge. Alvarado gets to those late rounds, but can struggle against top teams. It's hard to tell how good they'll do considering they haven't faced tough competition, but I'll tell you, this Alvarado team is very, very talented. Now, they graduated an excellent quarterback last season, and this season, this offense is incredible again. DeMarcus Belton is someone who's one of the more versatile players in the state. He's a running back who's eclipsed the 1,000-yard mark, both as a running back and not as a receiver, but with receiving yards as well. The team is very talented, very well coached, and they tend to go far every year. The question is, how far can they go? And if I were to make my best guess, I would say that they have another great playoff run, but do not win the state title. Now, Springtown is another team that is also very good. I think they're in this similar situation as Alvarado, where they can make a good run, but man, it's hard to win a state championship in Texas high school football. You're competing with the whole state, and if you don't win a state title, it's not the end of your season. Success is relative to situation, and although those teams have the potential to win, that shouldn't necessarily be their end goal. They got to take it 1 week at a time and focus on some hefty competition. Another team that we mentioned, Brock. Now, Brock can win the title, and I'm not trying to say Alvarado and Springtown cannot win. I don't want to box them in, but Brock is expected to be a championship contender, and they've been growing. They moved up to Class 4A last season, so they had a little bit of an adjustment period. So now this is your second year in Class 4A, and the team is incredibly talented. The program itself is very deep, and this is a community, a smaller community relative to some of the other schools we cover, that really, really cares about high school football. You have kids that are in middle school really wanting to grow up and be Brock Eagles and contribute to the overall success and history of the program. Now, Brock's had some heartbreaks. They've been expected to do well the past 3 seasons, and one way or the other, haven't been able to get the job done. They've been very talented, and they're very capable of getting the job done. But it doesn't always work out. Now, this year, they do have the potential, but it's another, thing when Brock hasn't been challenged yet. Now, Graham was a challenge for them last year. We saw that. This year, Brock thoroughly beat them. So it's hard to say how far they can go, but from what it looks like now, Brock is better than they were last year and more capable, and probably has a better shot to win a state title.
Is there anyone else who you think has a chance to get hot, or maybe even if you want to dip into the private schools too, just include them? Are there any other teams who you think you could even imagine lifting the trophy at the end of the year?
Yeah, well, gosh, it's hard to say, because we see it with our district play. Byron Nelson, outstanding team, but when they go up against Carroll, it's a little bit of a different story. So there really are levels to this. Only a select few teams can compete for state titles. Now, a lot of teams can get hot and make deep runs. I see Lake Ridge. If they get past Trinity, they have the ability to go on a run. They're a very talented squad. Trinity, on the other hand, if they get past Lake Ridge, one of the best offensive lines in Texas, great run game, hasn't looked great throughout the entirety of the season, but does have the potential to get to a next level and has great history. We've seen what Trinity's been able to do in the past. Now, there are other teams that I wouldn't necessarily label as state title contenders, but don't tell them that, because they're confident and ready to play. One of those squads is Arlington Bowie. Now, they just won consecutive district titles. They lost in the area round last season, but this team is playing confident. This team thinks they can beat anybody, and they deserve to be able to think that, because they just ran the table in their district, back-to-back district champs, in a district that's been heavily dominated by Martin the last decade. So do I think they'll win a state title? Probably not. Can they succeed and surpass expectations? Yes. To touch on All Saints real quick, private school. What All Saints is doing is very historic, and I think that Fort Worth football fans should take notice now and kind of recognize what they've been able to accomplish. A perfect season is incredibly challenging because there are so many variables in football. Now, everything has to go your way in order to have a perfect season. It's very challenging to do. One thing goes wrong, one kick, one play, one pick six, whatever it might be, and your season's over. But All Saints plays some of the toughest competition. Now, they're in TAPS Division 2, so they play in their non-district schools that are Division 1 enrollment. And let me tell you, the gap between All Saints division and the largest division in TAPS, the enrollment numbers, it's pretty wild. These schools are significantly larger than All Saints, but All Saints still has the firepower to beat them. Now, before last season, All Saints was kind of in a bubble with Liberty Christian when Liberty Christian was at its peak. But we saw last season, All Saints dominated the competition. No one really even got close to them. They thoroughly dismantled everyone with similar enrollments as them. And I think we're going to see the same thing this season. I really don't think anyone comes close to touching All Saints. Now, running the table in playoffs is easier said than done. But I think Forward football fans should be on the lookout for not only back-to-back state championships, but back-to-back perfect seasons.
Well, there are a lot of teams in the playoffs who, let's move beyond just the state championship contenders. And let's talk specifically about this first round of games. I know one you mentioned is Trinity against Lake Ridge, which seems like a great first round matchup. Maybe talk a little bit about how those teams specifically match up. And then also any other games that you're looking forward to this week that you think are going to be highly competitive.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about Lake Ridge for a second. Deshaun Edwards, great quarterback. Now, one of the best quarterbacks in the Fort Worth area. I think if they're going to beat Trinity, he's going to have to get hot. And the key for Lake Ridge is not just explosive offense, but sustaining it the entire game. Now, Trinity's a great program. You're going to have to play well to take them down. They have the firepower to do it. They're going to have to win in all three phases: offense, defense, special teams. I think since Trinity had those blunders early in the season, they've improved a bit. They look better. They have some momentum, and that's a scary thing to face in the opening round in Texas high school football playoffs. Now, Trinity is a great offensive line. Running back JT Harris, in my opinion, one of the greatest in the Fort Worth area, might be the best. He's a standout. He can change the way a game is going. That one is one of the harder games to predict, but I do not think it's the closest matchup in the Fort Worth area. I would give that nod to Arlington Heights and Brewer. Now, I was at Heights game last week, Battle of the Bonfire. They played Pascal, and I got to see Carson James up close and in person. This is one of the more talented running backs in the Fort Worth area. He is physical. He's tough. It took 3 Pascal players to take him down on nearly every carry. He breaks tackles with ease, and he is a game changer for Heights. Now, they gave him a heavy workload. They really trust him a lot. His dad is the coach. Curtis James has done a great job with that program since he took over a couple years ago, and Heights is fighting to make program history. Now, they're very talented. They lost to Saginaw earlier in the season, but I think since then they've showcased that wasn't necessarily a fluke, but that they are the undisputed top team in that district. They have talented players all over the field. At quarterback, Carmelo Carter, he is a dual threat QB who really brings a lot of versatility to their run game. And overall, the team is just fast. They fly around the field. The defense is good. Now, coming from that district, a lot of people expect them not to compete well. It's like, oh, it's a district with Fort Worth ISD teams. Maybe they won't translate well to the playoffs. And Heights is one of those teams that can definitely make a statement and showcase that they belong there.
And then, the other fun aspect of the playoffs are teams that really getting to the playoffs was the goal. And, and of course, everybody would love to play their best game and make a run. But, one of the great stories you've been tracking is Carter Riverside and Fort Worth ISD back in the playoffs after a 30-year absence. This is a case where I can date myself. One, this was before you were born. And this was back when I was actually still playing high school football here. I was a defensive lineman for Castleberry in 1995. We went over, played Carter Riverside at Scarborough Hanley for the district championship. Castleberry, we won a great win, but Carter Riverside got the second playoff spot. And then honestly, I did not realize till I moved back here that Carter Riverside had not been to the playoffs since that season.
Yeah.
But now they have. And just a great story about them making it. And then you wrote a story about a connection between a father and son, father who played in the game that I played in 1995. And then now his son here for this Carter Riverside team. And actually that 1995 Carter Riverside team was breaking a 36-year drought when they went to the playoffs. So very, very unique situation. Tell me tell me a little bit more about about Carter Riverside and their journey here.
Yeah, well, they are another team that surpassed all expectations. No one expects Carter Riverside to do anything, really. They have such a history of losing. But, those are the stories that are important too. It's not all about winning a state championship, because the reality is not all teams have the potential to win a state title. Now, it's a process. You go 1-0 every week, you build on what you're doing in a season, and eventually they might be able to build on making the playoffs and start to compete. And they have a really tough first round matchup against Alvarado. That'll be a little bit lopsided, but success is always relative to situation, and what they accomplished here is historic for this program and this school and this community. Now, yeah, those stories matter a ton, and it was great to speak with Mr. Walters and his son about the program's history, connecting them as family members. Carter Riverside is a team that might not be competitive in the first round, but they should be very, very proud of what they accomplished this season.
Yeah, are there any other great teams that or great stories that sort of stand out to you beyond teams you could think could go deep? I mean, just when you look down at the matchups, some teams you're like, hey, that's nice, that was cool. I mean, I know, for one thing, looking down at, maybe not about their history or whatever, but Keller got that fourth playoff spot in what was a very tough district, very competitive. We had 4 teams alive for that fourth playoff spot going down to the last game of the season. What are some of the good stories and teams that stand out to you?
Yeah, I think you can look at Eagle Mountain. Now, last year was their first season. They didn't have a single senior on that team, and you can see the improvement. Now, Coach Jeremy Mullins runs that program very well. The players are bought in and they believe. Now, they're not necessarily a team that's known as a state title contender, and the chances are they won't compete for a state championship. But they're a team that can make some noise in the playoffs. So on Friday, they'll be playing Benbrook, a team that made history last season by winning a few playoff games, and they'll have a chance to win their first playoff game in school history. Now, that's a very pivotal mark for any program, and the fact that they're doing it in year 2 without having any seniors last year, they're an experienced bunch. And for Benbrook and Eagle Mountain actually faced off in the regular season. Now, Eagle Mountain dominated that game, but Benbrook struggled with some turnovers. I was actually at that game covering in person. The game wasn't as lopsided as you might think looking at the score. Benbrook really struggled with some turnovers, was subbing their quarterbacks in and out. I think Benbrook has improved since that point. I expect their competition this week to be more competitive than their regular season matchup. But that's one to look at in terms of a historic moment if you're looking to see something cool on Friday. And, there are other good moments for other teams too. I think one thing that comes to mind is Keller Central. Now, Keller Central didn't even make the playoffs. Their story is done with. They won't be competing on Thursday or Friday, but they're a program that made massive strides. It's not always about making the playoffs. It's about, what can we do better than we did last season or the last week or whatever it may be. And Keller Central, they went from winning 1 to almost getting in. Now they were on, the wrong end and had to face some tough competition in District 4-6A with South Lake Carroll, with Byron Nelson, with Trinity, and they almost got it. So I think that Eric Vance and company deserve to feel really good about where they are this season. Now, there are some other programs that have done very well for themselves and made strides. I think you can look at Brewer. Brewer's playing Heights should be a good first-round matchup, but that squad really showcased that it deserves to have that playoff spot out of that district. And that's another case where, Aledo, Richland, Denton Ryan, those are top teams, arguably state powers. Aledo definitely, Denton Ryan definitely, Richland, very, very good program as well, and really has the potential to compete with anybody, I think. Brewer claiming that last spot, all those other teams in that district really fight for that spot because that's really the one that they have the potential to grab. So Brewer being able to beat Birdville, have a better record than Azle. It really shows that program's making strides.
And by the way, thank you, Chris, for your comment earlier. He said that after that Saginaw game, that Heights has looked really good since then. And yeah, there we go. Aside from the one loss, they've looked great, and they really did. I mean, at the start of the year, Charles, I'm trying to remember, didn't Heights have like a shutout streak? Am I remembering that right? Or what?
Yeah, they did. So Heights, during non-district, they didn't give up any points, and that really showed that their defense was here to play. That changed a little bit in district play, where they have competition that they go against, and they're very evenly matched games. Now, that district has tons of teams with great potential. Saginaw last year was a district champ, and they beat Azle in that first round. So a lot of people think, oh, teams from that district won't be able to compete with teams from District 3 5A Division 1, but they can. And we saw that last season in one of the better games I've covered during my time at the Star Telegram. Other teams that made the postseason, Chisholm Trail snuck in. They were a team that, struggled against some of the top teams in the district, but really proved themselves, and they showcased why they deserve that spot. Another team, Wyatt, they can compete with top teams in that district. They have a tough first round matchup, but they have the potential to showcase some talent. And, Saginaw, last year's district champ, they graduated a lot of players. They have new talented players, and I think they have a lot of potential. They didn't necessarily harness it, and they have a tough first round matchup, but they do have the potential to at least showcase what they've been improving on.
One, more of a philosophical discussion I wanted to talk to you about is, the idea of the playoffs getting watered down over the years. And let's just face facts. Congratulations to all these teams for making it, but there are going to be a fair amount of blowouts Thursday and Friday when you have first place teams playing fourth place teams.
Yep.
I remember, again, to show when I was in high school, 2 teams made the playoffs, and the old timers then thought we were soft because we got to have 2 teams make the playoffs. And when they played, only the district champion got to go to the playoffs, and teams went 9-1 and didn't go to the playoffs. Then they went to 3 teams making the playoffs, and at the time I thought that was a little soft, and then now 4 teams make it, and a lot of people say, oh, it's so easy to make the playoffs, and in a sense it is easier to make the playoffs, but the kids still are getting that playoff experience. I don't know how fun it is to just get whitewashed in the first round, but you did play in the playoffs. I mean, where do you come down on this debate? Do you think in the end that it's a net positive to let kids get the playoff experience, even if they're overmatched? Or do you think that it would be better for competition if it were only 3 teams or something like that?
I think it should be 4, and I'll tell you why. High school sports is so different than college and pro sports. In college and pro sports, you're really fighting towards that ultimate goal. Players are getting paid in college now. Professionals, of course, getting paid millions. Now, these high school players in Texas, they're not pro athletes. High school sports is not just about winning championships. It's about developing athletes, not just on the field, but off the field, teaching them why it's important to work as a team, why it's important to work hard in life in general. So I think when we get these opening first round matchups, it's unfortunate that some teams get blown out, and maybe the UAL can look at districts and how they can match up them, more evenly, but that's an incredible challenge. I don't really blame the UAL. It's an impossible thing to deal with. Now, you can look at Carter Riverside, you can look at other teams in a similar situation. The playoffs gives them something to fight for. It gives them something to search for. It's a goal. It's a common shared goal that they can work towards as a team, as a program. And, not every team has the potential to win a state title, for that to be the ultimate goal. And it gives more teams a chance to make history for their community. And in the day, that's a very important thing for, young players to need to have a chance to do something important for their community and their school. So I think although it's unfortunate that some teams may get blown out, I think that at the end of the day, they should all realize that, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're a failure. They worked very hard to get in that position. And as I've said before, success is relative to your situation and how many resources you have, how talented your team is, your enrollment, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I think there's an aspect of well, let's take this question from Chris. Looking at 6A D1, do you see any dark horse teams up there that you think could surprise some people in the playoffs? Obviously, that's the division that North Crowley is in. What are some of the other potential dark horses there?
Yeah, Chris, thanks for your question. I think when it comes to the Fort Worth area, the team that you have to talk about is North Crowley. I think a lot of people are almost tossing them away, thinking they don't deserve to be there in the situation that they're in, looked at as a state title contender. North Crowley does have the potential to, make a run. It's almost weird labeling them as a dark horse because, they should be in that group of state title contenders. But a lot of people, because of their non-district loss, will toss them to the side and think that they don't have what it takes to do it. Now, they have a very well-rounded offense. Their quarterback transfer from California, Hayes Cloutier, is very talented. And he's someone who, got to the team late, was able to settle in. You can see his improvement as time goes on. And that offense has a ton of potential. We see what they were able to do last year. Now, they're not quite at that level, but this defense is still at that level. Ray Gates is a defensive-minded coach. He runs a tight ship. The players are bought in. Now, earlier in the season, penalties were a problem. I don't want to say discipline was an issue, but, there were some things that they needed to fix. And, the last group of non-district games, they were able to right the ship and able to calm down, realize who they are. And if I had to guess, they'll be competitive with any team in the state. Now, I don't know if they'll win. Allen will be a very difficult challenge for them. But if they do get past Allen, watch out because they might go all the way.
All right, we've got a question here from Instagram. There you go, Charles. Thoughts on Trinity's pregame ceremonial dance, and would you do it with them if offered the opportunity?
No, I would not do it with them, because, man, that's something that's actually very, very special and unique to their program. I would never do that with them. I think that I'd get canceled if I did that. But it's something that makes them unique. And that's the greatness about Texas high school football tradition. We see programs have tradition, all over the state, and that's one of the most special ones. I think if you ask anybody that's a true Texas high school football fan about best traditions in the state, they'll bring up the Euless Trinity pregame dance. And I think I don't want to speak for the players, but I can tell you what I've seen in person, that it hypes them up. It gets them excited to play, and it gets them in that right mindset to be able to go out and compete with the best in the state.
Yeah, I think Trinity, like you mentioned, it's their persona this year. They're just a big, tough, run the ball at you kind of team. And their pregame ritual almost goes right with that, right? And we're going to do this, and then we're going to run the ball right at you. And like you said, it's a great, like I said, significant to their culture, something they, really, appreciate and like to express. And but no, they don't need you and me out there dancing with them.
Yeah, they really don't.
The last thing I want to follow up our discussion about having 4 playoff teams is I do think, on some of those fourth place teams, I think there's probably an element of cool of, if you get to go up against a Carroll and Aledo, some of these teams, even if you get blown out, obviously as long as nobody gets hurt, anything like that, where you're going to look back and be like, hey, I played the best, I got to see what the best look like. And I would assume that that's a net positive for these teams where they can say, hey, we played the state champion that year.
Yeah. And then 10 years later, when you look back on this experience, you'll be saying, hey, I played with some Division I talent. Some guys might get drafted to the NFL. Some guys might have Pro Bowl careers. You never really know with teams like Southlake, Carroll, and Aledo. One thing about Aledo that we should touch on is that this is likely their last season in Class 5A. And it's really hard to tell how they'll translate to the division. Now, you don't want to count them out and say that they won't be competitive in Class 6A, but it'll be different. There's a lot of D1 talent on teams like South Lake Carroll and teams like North Crowley. Of course, the district realignment is to be determined. But this could be the last chance Aledo has, at least for, the next couple of years. Don't want to put them in a box, but it's looking like, that might be the case, and that winning state championship in Class 6A is, of course, more challenging than 5A.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think, we'll expect them to still be highly competitive. I mean, obviously they have a model in what South Lake Carroll has done over the years. I mean, I'll say when I was in high school, Carroll was a 3A team, which is the equivalent of 4A now.
Mm-hmm.
But, they moved up the ladder, and, they had some success right away when they got to the highest division, sort of at the dawn of the spread offense. But then over the years, they've ebbed and flowed, and, they've sort of always been in the mix, though. And then they've had teams that can compete for state. And I would assume Aledo, a program, a town with that infrastructure for the program, that I think you'll see them. They'll be competitive, but will they be a top 10 team and competing for state championships? I think that's very much TBD.
Yeah, the first year I covered Aledo, the first year at the Star Telegram for me, it was almost a situation where you entered the year and they're just going to win. Like, they were that good. They were truly dominant. Last year was a little bit different. So unless they can get back to their, greatness of a couple years ago, it's going to be really, really hard. And of course, they're going to be competitive in 6A, but to be, going into the season as the number one team to beat every single year, that won't be the case anymore. But of course, they still have the potential to be great.
And I'm sure the 5A teams won't miss them.
I'm sure they won't. There are a lot of there are teams moving down too. You get to avoid Aledo at all costs. But yeah, I'm sure they won't miss them. That'll change things a lot within that class. Another thing we should touch on is Class 5A Division II. Now, there's a kind of a weird situation with the Fort Worth area teams in that class with Timberview, Colleyville Heritage, Seguin, and Argyle. They're going up against a district that is extremely competitive. Now, a lot of times in the bi-district round, we get matchups between a district that's really good and really bad. This is a weird case where both districts are outstanding, and a lot of times, teams expect the opening round to be an easy round. It's your first playoff game. You should go against an opponent that you can beat, especially if you're a higher seed, but it's just not the case with this round. We've seen teams win this opening bi-district game and then not have a harder game until a regional final. Now, I wouldn't consider any of these teams to be true state championship contenders. This classification is very challenging, but keep an eye on this opening bi-district round, because the Fort Worth area teams that do win out of that district might be able to go and make a region final.
Yeah, that's the possibilities there for a fourth place team to be right there neck and neck with the first place team. It's going to be very interesting. And just to put a bow on the Aledo discussion, now, what is the timeline? You wrote a story recently about they did the snapshot of their enrollment. When will we know for sure that they're moving up to 6A?
Yeah, so we should get the cutoff. I don't want to say for sure. This is just what's happened historically. We should get the cutoff at near the end of November. So, before the end of the month, we should know if Aledo is heading up to 6A. I'll say this, extremely likely. I don't ever want to say for sure because it's not factual information yet. Extremely likely to happen. And then we'll get the realignment, the official realignment in February. So that's a big deal for not just football, but for all sports. And we'll be able to see, is Aledo in a district with North Crowley? Are they in a district with South Lake Carroll? That'll really change the game and give us a lot of interesting matchups, not only in that, Class 6A Division 1 or 2 postseason, but the regular season. It should give us some really interesting, never before seen matchups between programs with history. Aledo, the most historic team in the state against, or they might be going against, programs like South Lake Carroll, North Crowley that have history of their own, or, other Class 6A teams that, have been dominant in the past.
All right. And then one last thing before we wrap up, let's touch on the volleyball playoffs. I know you just put in the pairings tonight. We're at the state semifinal round, correct? And we have, if fans have not been following it, the number one high school volleyball team in the country is right here in the Fort Worth area. Byron Nelson, they're the defending state and national champions. They're undefeated this season. And so where do they stand now, or do they play Friday? Fill us in on the details.
Byron Nelson plays Saturday, as do all the teams. It's man, they're just a dominant program. It's so hard to be perfect. We've talked about All Saints and what they are able to do. Perfection is one of the hardest things to reach in sports. There's a lot of pressure on this squad. Is something I wrote about in the feature I filed a month back. This team is searching for something that has been done very few times in the history of Texas high school volleyball. They're going against some of the toughest competition. They were in Division II last year. They're in Division I last year, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's more tough facing schools with larger enrollment. But we've seen throughout this playoff run, they're just dominant. They are very dominant, and if I had to make my best guess, they'll be state champions again. Of course, it's easier said than done, winning a state semifinal and a final against, some of the top schools in the state. But they're just so unbelievably talented. Sophie Peterson is not only the best player in the Fort Worth area, but one of the best players in the country. She runs that offense as a setter with precision. Kylie Kleckner, great outside hitter. Ashlyn Say, great outside as well. They're just talented all around. Coach Groff does an outstanding job with that program. Now, she's won state titles now in 2019 and last season. So she's really solidified herself as the top head coach in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
And now the timeline for them, the semifinals are on Saturday, and then the state championships are the following week at Garland, correct?
Yeah, they're in Garland.
Okay. All right. Well, very good. Well, you will certainly be out. We'll tell everybody your schedule here, where you're going Thursday and Friday.
Yeah, on Thursday, I'm covering South Lake Carroll. Now, it's a little bit of a lopsided matchup. The Dragons are expected to handle business in this one, but I do want to get a closer look at their team. So many talented individuals. You got Brock Boyd, Ohio State pledge, who has potential to be the Star Telegram Player of the Year, another player who has potential to be the Star Telegram Player of the Year, and Max Prep's National Player of the Year is Angelo Renda. Now he's a quarterback who just stuffs the stat sheet. At South Lake Carroll, they have a history of developing quarterbacks, and that goes all the way back to Riley Dodge, who was a standout QB at South Lake Carroll. Riley and the Dragons have a chance to make some serious history for that program. They care so much about it. So I'm going to try my best to cover that story as best I can. They have a running back, Davis Penn, who had a season-ending injury last season, is coming back. He'll be a key piece to watch. Robbie Ladd, William Chin on defense. Those are people who can make an impact. And then on Friday, I'll be covering Heights and Brewer, one of the more competitive matchups in the Fort Worth area. That should be a great game, a very evenly matched game. And I'm excited to get this playoff season going. It's the busiest time of the year, but it's also the most fun.
Absolutely. And everybody can follow along your work on startelegram.com. And we'll have our army of writers out on Thursday and Friday, and then all through the high school football season. It's the best time of the year, these 6 weeks headed down to the state championships at AT&T Stadium. So thank you for everyone who tuned into this tonight, and just follow our coverage along the way. We'll take you all the way to state, and talk to you later. Good night.